Okay, so inshallah during today's session, I want to review navigation. Let me see. Yes, I want to basically review navigation, and then hopefully, if we have time, I can start introducing the model view model architecture. So this is the outline. So first of all, just to remind ourselves that navigation is all about allowing the user to move between screens to complete tasks. So that's what navigation means. And our goal as designers and developers is to make the journey, the user journey across our app as easy as possible and simplify the journey and make it easy for the user to complete their tasks by providing them an intuitive and easy to use navigation. So first of all, I want to first review quickly how we can open activities and how we can communicate between activities without using the nav component. So the nav component is a new component that was introduced by Google on Android around 2017, so it's almost 3 years old technology. But before this, we had an older way of interacting between activities. So it's good to be aware of the old way, because sometimes you just want to have some simple scenario. You don't want to use the nav component. You just want to open an activity from another one. You can go ahead and do so. Then I want to make you aware of dialogs. So on Android app, you can create different dialog boxes and you show them to the user as they interact through the app. Also, I want to quickly review the different navigation UI that are available on Android, such as the top app bar, the bottom navigation, the bottom nav, and the nav drawer. Those are the main navigation UIs that comes with Android. And finally, we will spend most of our time on the navigation component. This is the recommended way, the most powerful way of creating navigation for Android apps. Okay, so if I have multiple activities and I want to go from one activity to another, for example, let's say if I am in the main activity and I want to open register activity. So I can do so by creating an instance of a class called intent. So I go ahead and create an instance of intent. I pass the current activity as a parameter, and then I pass the name of the activity that I want to open. Then I go ahead and ask Android, please go ahead and start this intent. And this will cause this activity to open. So intent enables me to start other activities, and I can even pass some data to the new activity that is created. I'll show you this shortly. So intent is a way of communicating between the current activity and other activities. It could be either inside my app or it could be even outside my app. I can get some activity to be executed from another app. So that's why on Android we have two types of intent. We have implicit and explicit. So for example, what you see here is an explicit intent. explicit. So what explicit means, I specify exactly which activity I want to open or which activity I want to start. But implicit, I just specify what I want, and then the user can select the app to handle the action. So let me show you. For example, if I go here to, this is Google Play, and I go to apps, there is an app here. Now, if I go here, for example, and do share, this will create an implicit intent. I just want to share this. And then Android gives me all the possible options, the possible apps that can handle this share action. I could share using Teams, using WhatsApp, using Gmail, and so on. So explicit means go ahead and start this particular activity. Implicit means I want you to do this action, for example, share or send an email or take a photo. And then Android will give me all the possible apps that are able to help me do that particular task. And the end user will select which app they want to do the sharing. And once I select the app, then an activity within that app will open to be able to share that particular piece of content. Okay, so that's basically the idea. So let me show you. So here is the explicit intent, and here is the implicit intent. So in the implicit intent, all I do, I'll say, oh, by the way, I want to open a website. So I choose the action, which is, in this case, action underscore view, and I pass the parameter, in this case, the URL I want to open. And then I'll go ahead and say start activity, and I'll give the intent. So in here, this is an implicit intent. I did not specify which activity to start. Instead, I just specified an action to take, and I gave it some data, some input. And then Android gave me the possible apps that can help me achieve this task. An end user will select one of these apps, and then that particular website will be opened. So in here, I'm giving you a simple intent, but later on we will see more advanced intent, like for example, to take a photo or to select a photo from a gallery or to take permission to go to the internet and programmatically download some data. So all of these can be done using intents. But the simpler form is the one I'm showing you here. Now, when you use implicit intent, of course, you can pass some data. So in here, for example, I am passing the URL to open. Also, when you use explicit intent, for example, in here, I'm saying, go ahead and create an intent that I will be using to start this activity. I can also pass some data to this activity. So for example, I'll go to the intent and say put extra. I want to pass the ID and I want to pass the name. Then I go ahead and start the activity. And then the recipient, the activity that will be started, in our case, the register activity, can extract and retrieve this data that I passed in the intent. It does so by going to the intent variable, the intent built-in object. It's a built-in property of activity, and it says intent.get int extra because this value is an int. So I'll read it using int extra. If I cannot read it, the default value will be 0. And here I'm reading intent extra, get string extra, and I'm reading the name. So this I use put extra to pass parameters to the activity, and I read them in the recipient using int extra for integers and string extra for strings. And that's basically how I pass data between activities using intent. So this is the old way. Be aware of it, but there is a much better way of doing it using the nav component that we will discuss shortly. Okay, the other thing you need to be aware when you build your app and you want to do some navigation is you can, from time to time, you might use a dialog box and show user a dialog box. And here you use it, you shouldn't use it very often. You use it sparingly, occasionally you use it. If you want to ask the user to take some critical decision or make some choice, then you show them some dialogue, and the user will not be able to move forward until they take an action on that dialogue. Then the dialogue will close and the user can go back to the previous activity, to the activity that they were working on. I'm sure you have seen this in many Android apps. So here is an example. If I want to create an alert dialog, so basically there are three types of dialogs: alert dialog, simple dialog, and confirmation dialog. Alert dialog, for example, in Android, in Google Maps, when you open it, especially first time, it will ask you, the app will use a location service. Do you allow the app to do so, yes or no? So either you agree or disagree. So an alert box basically has a title, it has a message, and it has agree, disagree buttons that the user can click. When they click one of these buttons, the dialog box, the alert box will disappear. So how do we create such box on your UI? So very simple, you use the material alert dialog builder. And for you to use this one, you need to import the material design library. So if you go to the example provided, you will see it there in the dependencies. And all you do, you say material alert dialog builder. This is a built-in class on that material design library. And then you start setting, you set the title. This is the title you want to show. This is the message you want to show to the user. And then two buttons. For example, in here I have disagree and cancel, for example, two buttons. And then I provide an event handler. When the discard button is clicked, I do some action. In this case, I'm just showing a message. And when the cancel button is clicked, I do some other action. So here I'm basically I configure the dialog, and then I show it. Very simple. So using this class, set title, set message, and set two buttons, a positive and negative, and I'll provide an event handler. What should happen when the user clicks discard, and what should happen when the user clicks cancel? Okay, this will show me the button and with two event handlers. Now, the other type of dialogues is known as action dialog or simple dialog. In here, what I have, I give the user a couple of actions to take. For example, here I want them to select one of the backup accounts or add a new one. So they can either select one of these actions or cancel the whole dialog box. So the way I show this dialog, again, I use the same class, material alert dialog builder, and I pass to it an array of actions. Here are the actions that you see here are defined in this items array: email 1, email 2, and add account. And then I set the title. This is the title, set up a backup account. And then I'll call this set items set items, and I pass these possible actions the user can take. And then when the user clicks one of these actions, this event will be triggered and I can handle it. And I can know exactly which of these three was selected. And which of these three will be selected is selected will be assigned to this parameter called which. So if the user clicks this one, the which will be assigned user01@gmail.com. If the user clicks add account, this string will be assigned to which. Now, if the user clicks cancel, nothing will happen and this will not be triggered. This event will not be triggered. So that's basically what simple dialog means. It has a set of actions the user can take, and I can define those actions by using this method set items. The other way of using the dialog is I give the user a couple of options to select from, and then once they select the option, I can basically allow them to say to confirm or to cancel. So again, I use the exact same class, which is Material Alert Dialog Builder. I set the title, and then I define these choices. So how do I define these choices? Again, I define them in an array. So for example, here none, Callisto, Luna, and so on. And here I am telling the dialog, please go ahead and make the first option I want it to be checked. So how do I set up the dialog box? So I use here set single choice items, and I pass the list of options and which one will be automatically selected. And then as the user clicks on these, if they select a different one, this event will take place, and which will be assigned one of these values. For example, if the user selects this one, the which will be assigned Luna. And then when the user clicks OK or cancel, if they click OK, the event handler associated with the OK button will be executed. If they click cancel, the event handler associated with a negative button will be executed. So that's basically how you give the user the ability to choose one of the possible choices and click OK. So just with these few lines of code, I'm able to create this dialog and show it to the user. The last option you can use is multi-choice. It looks very similar to single choice. With single choice, the dialog will render radio buttons. So you will get a radio buttons. And you can select only one option. With multi-choice, see here set multi-choice. What you do, you will get multiple options, and you can have multiple items selected. And these are using basically checkboxes. Now, the options the user will see, I create them in an array, and whether they are ticked or not ticked, I put them in another array. For example, none, when initially the dialog is shown, none will be ticked, forum will be unticked, social will be unticked, and update will be unticked. And as the user ticks those checkboxes, this event will be executed. And the lucky one that was ticked, the text of that checkbox will be assigned to which. For example, if I check none, which will be none. And as the user checks these boxes, this event will be triggered. And when the user clicks OK or cancel, if they click OK, the event handler associated with the positive button will be executed. If the user clicks cancel, the event handler associated with a negative button will be executed. And that's basically how we create a dialog boxes in Android. We use the same class, material alert dialog builder. Very simple to use, very useful in some scenarios. So be aware of it. You might need it in your projects or in your other apps, but don't overuse it. Don't overuse dialog boxes because they interrupt the normal flow of the app and they block the user until they make some action. It is useful in some small scenarios, but don't overuse them. Okay, so the next thing to know about navigation is the navigation UI. What are the options we have? So if I go back to the app, if I go back to the Play Store, you can see here in the Play Store, I have this bottom nav bar. The bottom nav bar, it is a global navigation. It allows me to go and visit the top destinations in this app. And you should limit this bottom nav bar to between 3 and 5 top destinations, no more than 5. This is the recommended design. Now, if you have more than 5 top destinations, don't put them in the bottom nav bar, put them in nav drawer. So this nav drawer is accessible when the user clicks this nav drawer button or if they swipe from left to right. So they will see this drawer. And the drawer, you can put more than 5 top actions. And they could be unrelated. For example, these are related to subscription and notification. This is related to account and payment. This is related to opening this kind of advertising other apps from Google Store. And then we have the top bar. Now, the top bar changes per screen. So take a look at this. Here, when I am under games, the top bar says search for apps and games. If I go to books, the top bar shows search for book. So the top bar changes per screen. Now, if I go to apps and then I go here to scan, you see here the top bar changed again. So the top bar is per screen. So keep this in mind. The top bar is per screen, and the nav bar, the bottom navigation and the nav drawer is for the whole app. It shows top destinations in the app. Here, 3 to 5 top destinations. In here, you could have more than 5. So, Allahu Akbar. So that is the idea of the nav UI. So now let me just quickly iterate through this. So the top app bar, as you can see here, is related to current screen. So be careful. This is not shared across the whole app. This is per screen. And the content of it could be different from one screen to another. Now the bottom nav bar shows us the top level destinations, 3 to 5. You could have in there, you could have these options could be just an icon. It could be an icon and text. It could be an icon and text and badges. You can see here some badges. It's showing me that there are 3 notifications waiting for me to take a look at. So this is the difference between the top bar and the bottom nav bar. Now, on Android app, if you want to add a bottom nav, it's very simple. Just go to your main activity and look up in the palette of views, look up bottom nav bar and drag it and drop it into your layout. And you need to connect it with a menu that you define as a resource. So you define your menu, for example, in here, in this example you did in the lab, you create your menu, something like this, and you can connect your menu either to the nav drawer or to the nav bar. Okay, and then on the activity code, you can listen to this event on navigation item selected. So on navigation item selected. So as the user selects different options in here, this event will be triggered on navigation item selected. And then usually you use a win expression to take an action based on what the user have clicked on. So based on the menu item ID, if the user, for example, clicked register, you navigate to register. If the user clicks movies, you navigate to movies. If the user clicks books, you navigate to books, and so on. And so you handle this event on navigation item selected. Now, another very common navigation UI that apps you will see very often in apps is this floating action button. Floating action button. For example, when you open your email, I'm not sure if I have an email here. If you open your email, you will see it there. Maybe it's not configured. If you open your email, you will see, yes, you will, okay, take me to Gmail. Yes, you see here, this is basically called the floating action button. And you use it typically for one action, which is the primary most common action. So maybe I came to this email because I wanted to compose a new message. So I click here, it can take me to creating a new message, composing a new message. And typically it is placed on the bottom right, typically. How you add it to your app? Again, very simple. Go to your activity, go to the views palette and look for floating action button. Drag it and drop it into your layout. Configure its layout so it is, if you wish, you could put it on the bottom right. And typically it is a circle with some icon. And then on the code, you just listen to the on-click event. It is very, very similar to a button. It is actually a button. It's just happens to be a floating button on top of the content of the screen. So in this case, for example, when the user clicks on the blog post floating action button, I navigate to add blog post. The final one is the navigation drawer. You use it when you have more than 5 top destinations, and you have seen how to do this in the lab. So I'll not go through the details in here. Okay, now, as I explained recently, around 2017, Android has introduced a very important component to the Android platform, which is the navigation component. And this really changes the way we build applications. So it enables a new pattern and makes it very, very easy to do. And this pattern is basically a single activity, multiple fragment. So first of all, what is a fragment? A fragment is very, very similar to an activity, but it is portion of the UI. For example, in a fragment, you will not find the bottom nav bar. You will not find the bottom nav bar. You will not find the drawer. Those are added to the main activity. So it's just a portion of the activity. For example, portion of the UI. For example, in here, let me take you to my simple example here. So what I have, this is the home, and in here, when I click this button, this is a fragment that gets loaded here. I go back. If I swipe, this is another fragment. So this bottom nav bar belongs. This bottom nav bar belongs to the main activity. So this bottom navigation bar belongs to the main activity. And as I click those nav bar options, a fragment gets loaded into the main activity. So basically what I have is, I have my main activity. It has here a bottom nav, and on top of it there is basically what is known as a nav host fragment. So this is kind of a container. It's a container. So as the user clicks this nav options, the actual fragment associated with this nav option will be loaded into this nav host fragment. So I'll have one activity and multiple fragments. And the nice thing about fragments, I can add and remove fragments at a runtime. So you can see here, while the application is running, as I click through this, a new fragment gets loaded. When I click here, when I do some action and do, let's say, login, a new fragment gets loaded. New fragments get loaded. Okay, so that is the idea. So I have one activity, one main activity with the bottom nav bar, and I have fragments that get loaded as the user navigates through the app. Now, a fragment, as I said, is very similar to an activity. It has an XML layout that defines the UI, and it has a Kotlin class to handle events. And it has a life cycle. It gets created, it gets paused, it gets destroyed. So it's very, very similar to an activity. The only thing different is that it can be loaded inside another activity at a runtime. That's the main difference. And it's not the full UI, it's just a portion of the UI. For example, you see this blog posts here, it does not have the bottom navigation, it will not have the nav drawer. Those are defined once in the main activity. Okay, so the navigation component makes it easy for us to implement this single app multi-fragment. So single activity with multiple fragments. And these fragments get loaded into the main activity as the user interacts with the app. So with the NavController, one of the main things we need to do when we create the nav component, when we use nav component, is we create a navigation graph using a navigation editor. So this is what you did in the lab. For example, in the lab, you created this nav graph. It shows the possible destinations within the app. So first, the user will see the list of transactions. They can either go ahead and get the details of the transaction, or they can transfer fund. When they transfer fund, they need to specify from which account and the amount. Then they specify to whom the payment will be made. Then the user go to confirmation. And once the confirmation is done, the user will go back to the main page. So what we find in the nav graph, we find destinations. These are possible places or fragments. There are possible fragments that the user can navigate to. And actions are paths between these destinations. So it's a path, it's a possible path the user can take from one destination to another. For example, when the user starts, they can either go to, in this case, from this activity they can basically go to transaction details. From transaction list, they can go to transaction details. That's it. From transfer fund, they can go to select beneficiary. From select beneficiary, they can go to confirmation. So the actions show us the paths the user can navigate to. And the navigation component interacts very nicely with the navigation UI we just discussed. So it integrates very nicely with the nav bar, with the bottom bar, with the it integrates very nicely with the drawer, as I will show you shortly. Okay, so these are the main components. These are the main components that come with the nav component. First of all is the navigation graph. In here you use an editor that I showed you here. You use the editor to create the nav graph. Then you go to your main activity and you add a nav host. You see here the main activity. If I go to the layout of my main activity, here is my main activity. It will have a navigation nav host. This is very important. So the main activity will have a nav host, and here is where the fragments will be loaded. So, and then the most important component of the navigation is the NavController. So you use the NavController to ask the app to move from one fragment to another. So let me show you an example. So for example, in here, all you do, if I am in here, if I click this fragment here, I get navigated to the blog post details. So I can basically register on-click event. When the user clicks, all I do, I go and say find the NavController. This is a built-in method in the fragment. So the fragment has this method called FindNavController. And then I call the function navigate. And then I'll give it the to action. And then this NavController, this fragment will be loaded into this nav fragment. So the fragment will be loaded in the nav host fragment. That's it, very easy. Find nav host and navigate, and you give it the action you want the user to go to. Okay, now you can see here, this is very nicely, you get this back button. It's also known as the navigate up. When I click it, I go back to the main screen. So how do I achieve this? How do I get this arrow going back? And also I get this nicely here. In here I get the title of my fragment. So the fragment is loaded here. The title will be added to the top bar. How do I achieve this? In 2 lines I can achieve this. In the main activity, on create event handler, what I do is I go ahead and say set up action bar with NavController. So I associate the action bar with my NavController. So all I do to have this nav up, I go to my main activity and I go to onCreate of my main activity and call this method here, setup action bar with NavController. I pass the activity and I pass the NavController. How do I get the NavController? By calling this built-in method called FindNavController, and I pass to it as a parameter the ID of the nav host. So these two lines create for me this nav up arrow automatically. Now when I click that nav arrow, nav up, the app goes back to the main activity by this extra line of code. So I'll say on support nav up, I want you to use the NavController and navigate up. What navigate up means, go back to the previous screen you came from. So when I click here, I get this nice nav up arrow. I click it and I go back from where I came from. Okay. Now, let me show you one more thing that you can do. If I have what you can also do when you navigate from one screen to another, you can pass some parameters. For example, in here, this is the login fragment. I can put some value in here and go ahead and do login. So that whatever I have entered there, whatever I have entered here, whatever I have entered will be passed to the next fragment. So how do I pass parameters between fragments? All I do, I go to my destination fragments, in this case, the welcome fragment, and I create an argument. Here is the argument. I give it a name, so because I'll be receiving the username, and I give it the data type. That's it. So this fragment will be accepting a parameter coming from the previous fragment. Then, before I navigate, when the user clicks this login button, so when the user clicks this login button that you see here, this is what happened. I create a bundle, which is nothing but a map that maps username with whatever I have typed here. So I create a bundle that maps this string with this username the user have entered. And then when I say, find me the NavController navigate, I give it the action I want to visit, and I give it the bundle I want to pass as a parameter. So this parameter will be passed to my welcome fragment. How do I receive it from the welcome fragment? So on view created on the welcome fragment, I have this arguments, automatically created object called arguments, and basically I can go to argument.getString and I give it the name of the argument. And this way I will retrieve the name that was passed. So for example, in here I passed Ali. So this will be bundled in here and passed when I navigate. And the recipient, when I click login, the recipient will basically get it by going to login, arguments, question mark, because this could be null, get string, and I use the same name I used when I bundled the parameter. Then I will get the username and do whatever I wish to do with it. In this case, I just add it to welcome Ali. Okay, this is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is that I use a plugin that comes with the navigation component. This plugin is basically I go to my build Gradle and basically add this plugin here, this one. Android X navigation safe args.kotlin, and in the project Gradle file, I'll import this plugin. And what this plugin does, it basically generates. If you go here, generated, you don't touch this stuff, but just be aware of it. It goes ahead and generates these classes for me. And then I can use these classes that are generated to basically navigate from one location to another. I can also use it to pass parameters. So what I have here, let's take a look. So what I do here, when the user clicks this login button, let me show you again. When the user clicks the login button here, instead of using this old way, here, find navigate to the welcome action and pass this bundle. Instead of doing it this way, this is an auto-created class that was created by the Safe Args plugin, and I'll say login fragment.directions.toWelcome. This is automatically generated, and I pass the parameter here. So this login fragment, if you see here, if you remember our navigation graph, here is our navigation graph. So for each destination, there is a direction gets created. For each destination, I have a direction created, and I can use that to do the navigation. So in our example, in the login fragment directions, I can go to welcome, and welcome expects a username. And then on the recipient side, I create this parameter called args of type welcome args. This is again an auto-generated class, and I'll ask the runtime to automatically go ahead and initialize it for me, and magically I can access it to get the username that was passed by the login. So there's a little bit of magic going on here. What I mean here, from the login screen, from the login fragment, I'll go to login fragment directions.toWelcome, and I pass the username that was entered by the user. And then I navigate to that action. Now on the receiving side, which is the welcome, fragment, I create this variable args welcome fragment args, and I initialize it by this built-in function called var args. This will be automatically created, and whatever the user have, whatever the login fragment is passed to me will be available in this variable called args, and then I can access the username that was passed from the login fragment to the welcome fragment. But this way, this is type safe. If this is a string and I try to pass an int, the compiler will not let me do this. But in here, in the previous in this previous example, sorry, in this previous way, if I pass here, let's say, an integer, the compiler will not know. It doesn't really care. It just passes it. It doesn't really check that the data type that you pass in is matching the expected data type of the destination. But in here, everything is checked. That's why we call it safe args. The arguments that you pass are basically checked. The data type is checked. Sorry, just give me 1 second. That's it. I will let you go. If I log in here, take a look at this. If I go here and log in, when I click back, can you see here when I click back, I don't go back to the login screen. I go back all the way to the main menu. And this is very important, to the main destination, or to the main, I'll go back to the main destination. And this is so important because when I log in, I don't want to go back to the login screen. If the user goes back, they should go back to the home screen. So how do I achieve this? So the way I achieve this, when in this navigate to home action, what I do, I add this extra configuration here to say pop to home fragment and delete and pop to inclusive. Okay, let me try to explain it. Please give me 2 minutes. I will explain this one and let you go. Here it is. So if I go to my, let me see if I can see the, yeah, let me do it this way. Here is my login. Now, so as the user, we are here in the login. So the login, there is something called the backstack maintained by Android app. So when I visit the login, first of all, sorry, I was here. I was in home. So in the backstack, I was home. Then I went to the login. From the login, I typed username and then went from login to welcome. So the backstack has home, login, and welcome. If I don't do anything particular, if I don't configure my action properly, if I click this, the user will go back to login. I don't want this behavior. The user already logged in. It doesn't make any sense to take them back to login when they click back. When they click back, I want to clear this backstack. I want to clear it. And I want the user to, all this history to be cleared, and I want the user to go to the home page, to the home screen. That's how I do it. I say pop up to, which means remove all these previously visited destinations, including the home fragment, and then go to the home fragment. So when the user clicks back, what the backstack will have, it will be cleared, and then the home fragment will be here. If I don't put this inclusive, then I will have home two times. But if I put pop up to inclusive, this will clear the whole stack, including the home, and then put the home back to the stack. Otherwise, the user, if I don't do this, the user will go back to the previous screen, which is in our case, the login screen, which is not very good experience. So that's why I use this pop to home screen, home fragment, pop up to inclusive, which means clear the stack, clear the whole stack, and start fresh, and go back to the home, and basically the stack will be empty. Now, if I click here, we will exit because there is nothing in the stack. I'll just exit the app. That's it. I hope it's clear. So if you have any question, please let me know. In 10 minutes, we'll take a break for 10 minutes, and I'll be back for any office hour if you have any questions regarding the content or regarding your project. Thank you very much. Thanks.